Joshua Habermann, Artistic Director of the Santa Fe Desert Chorale, and it is my pleasure to be in conversation today with the wonderful Glenn Miller. Glenn is the Director of Music at Kirk in the Hills in Bloomfield Hills, Michigan. He is also a professional Oktavist, and I will leave it to Glenn to explain to our listeners exactly what that means and what it is that he does. Glenn, it's great to have you here with us today.
So good to see you, Josh, across these time zones. And it's a pleasure to be able to speak with you and to share a bit about first of all, what it means to be an Oktavist. Actually, I didn't know about the term Oktavist until about 10 years ago. I was just a basso profundo that sang a lot of Russian repertoire, and that was like an engagement I had in Salt Lake City that I learned about that. But I guess the Oktavist is the term that really everybody uses these days, and it's for us guys that sing all these notes at the bottom of the staff and below the staff. And I guess the term comes from a lot of times we're singing a note that's an octave below the normal bass line. So I think that's kind of where it comes from.
Thanks. And it's, of course, we're talking today, especially in anticipation of the Desert Chorale's release of the Rachmaninoff Vigil recording, which came from a 2016 performance that you participated in. Mm-hmm. And you are somebody who essentially sort of travels the world singing Rachmaninoff Vigil and, of course, other Russian pieces as well that call for this low, mm-hmm. low sound that's so unique and special to that repertoire. Do you have a memory of those 2016 performances amongst all the ones that you've done in your life?
I just remembered that, you know, there are those performances when it really feels like everything is happening right, you know, and there was an energy and of course the audience was just eating it up, and they were giving us great energy, and the way it just all unfolded, that's kind of I don't remember a specific moment, but it was just a whole entirety type of a feel like this performance is, everything's really clicking. Everything's, you had the piece so under your belt. The singers have, you know, so many of those singers had done the piece a number of times. So everybody was very comfortable with singing it. Nobody was fighting with text or notes or anything like that. And all the little spots, you know, there's a couple little spots, that sometimes the notes get a little fudged, you know, and I think of that one baritone's probably da 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 da, you know, I forget, you know where that is, and that was spot on, and you know, we got on the train and it ran, you know, it just was great, you know.
It's certainly one of my happiest memories of making music with those singers, and just thinking of the extraordinary experience that was in the room at that time, as you said, yeah. Of just all the people, and you look across the choir and you realize, well, these are people who have, you know, bring such expertise and such a background and experience with that piece in particular. So that was certainly my experience too, that there was an ease about it. And ease and Rachmaninoff Vigil are not two things that typically go together. It's not an easy thing to do. Can you say a little bit more about the challenges of what a singer has to do to pull that piece off?
Yeah, it's a real endurance test. You've got to manage your vocal energy. So when you get to the big movements, like, which is it 9 and 12? I can never get the numbers right. Yeah, the Magnificat and that big Gloria thing. And you know, first of all, not having spent your wad before then, but also keeping your reserve filled, so you can get to the end of the entire work, those last three movements. You know, that's always a challenge, for particularly if you're new to the piece. That's the biggest challenge, I think, in addition to getting the notes and everything, the text, particularly the text, under your belt. But just a management type thing. And the other thing for me as a bass, it's oftentimes, we had a nice bottom lineup down there. Sometimes when I've done it, it's like I'm the lone man down there. So that kind of requires me to expel more throughout. And but when there's some, you know, when you got a good section down there, like 3 that have all the notes pretty much, you know, you can play off each other. Like I'll leave up here while you take that, into that type of thing, you know.
And I know, Glenn, that you've traveled to Russia and experienced some of the places that Rachmaninoff lived. Can you share a little bit about what those travels have been like and what that revealed to you about this piece in particular?
Yes. Well, for starters, singing that repertoire. I haven't sung the Vespers in Russia, but I've done other Russian works, the liturgical works. And first of all, being in their holy spaces, and the whole feeling, all the gold and the icons and the frescoes and all that, and just the feeling of prayer that's kind of immersed in those walls. That really speaks. That really spoke to me. But also not just the spaces, but just the feeling of the country, of the people, and the depth of their experience, through centuries of oppression. You really feel it in all that music. I've come to realize, and so that illuminates the Vespers, and particularly when those sections where there's the alto solo on, or the tenor solo, hearing the color that's really part of the native, the person, but also seeing to just the landscape, the countryside, and the ruggedness of it all, and the barrenness, actually, So and how all of those chants that many of those movements are based on in the Vespers, in the Vigil, they're born of that earth, So that we can imagine it, but until you've really drunk the water, or experienced the liturgy.
What a rich experience it must have been to have been in those places and in those spaces, and to hear the music where in those places for which it was written and imagined. I can only think that must have been a really moving thing.
Yeah, I will. Yeah, I'll always treasure it. It was like the icing on the cake. I really want to do the Vespers over there before it's all done. Just to put a period at the end of the sentence. Yeah.
Yeah. So thinking back on those 2016 performances, I remember distinctly, being with the choir and supporting them, which, of course, is what the conductor does, but also being aware of a quiet that had enveloped the audience at that time. And, usually in any live concert, there's always motion and movement, and that's normal human things. But I remember the very still atmosphere. It's almost as if people came into the space, and of course it's the Cathedral Basilica in St. Francis in Santa Fe, which is such a beautiful space, and it inspires meditation and quiet. But it really was unique in that concert. From the beginning to the end, there was just continuous music with no interruption, and at the end there was this sort of response and outpouring, almost as if we got a window into another world that music invites us to.
Yes, that the Vigil does that piece, that whole genre does it, but the Vigil, the Rachmaninoff in particular, he does that. People just stand, they can't move, and it's extremely powerful, and it takes you to that thin place, between heaven and earth, and that's the whole point of that genre,
Well, how many times, if you had to guess, I can only imagine, how many times it really has been that you've sung this piece. You have any best guesses?
It's got to be 80 to 90, maybe at 100. I don't know. I do have a spreadsheet, and I kind of make notes a little bit, about the places, the experience, Some of it will be destroyed when I pass. I will surely, no.
Well, it would be a real archive, because, for our listeners, I'll tell them that when anybody performs this piece, they're always on the lookout for low basses. There's an old quote when Rachmaninoff wrote it. We always associate, low basses with Russian music, and we think, oh, they must be very plentiful. But I read an old quote when I was preparing, and somebody said to Rachmaninoff, when they looked at the score and they saw these notes, they said, but where are we going to find these people to sing these notes? They're as rare as asparagus. Right.
Yes, the asparagus quote.
Very
It
much
makes
like,
every set of program notes, you know? It's, you
but
know.
it's a very rare voice type
Yeah.
that you're blessed with. And, you're certainly the first call when people are considering doing the piece.
Mhm.
And there's sort of, I imagine, a little small fraternity of you that go around and do this.
Yes, yes. I had in particular, recently I got to do it with Eric Alatorre from, who was with Chanticleer, and Adrian Peacock from the UK, and we're kind of like, the three, that get called a lot. And, but yeah, we're kind of a small group, and we'll call each other. Did you get a call about this one? Are you doing this? That type of thing, and, but yeah, it's kind of nice to be wanted.
Absolutely.
And grateful too that our voice type, with good care and all that type of thing, our shelf life is pretty long, because voices get lower as you age, and as long as you don't push your chords to overdo it, so a wobble comes in, it's not over yet.
Yes. Well, I remember very fondly the first time that you and I met, and I think it was during one of these performances. It was with Corral in Austin.
96 or 97?
Sounds right.
Yeah.
And I was singing in that choir, and I had just never heard such a sound, as when you came in, and all of a sudden all the chords felt easier, and those of us who were singing, the higher parts just felt like there was a floor to trust underneath, and it made such a huge difference.
Yeah, the thing about like my voice part, us Oktavists, that are not about just kind of showing all the time, because we generate not just a lot of fundamental in our color, but a lot of overtones. The upper parts lock into those overtones, and it is like not just a floor, but it's like a wave that they can ride, and things kind of fall into a line vertically, much more easier for everybody.
That was certainly my experience there. I remember that. I think we did one rehearsal without you, and then you came in with the rest of the bass group, and all of a sudden I felt like all was right with the world.
Yeah, I've heard that before too. With other groups, it's yeah, that's what we do. I'll never forget that performance, because I had never heard of it was New Texas back then, and I never heard of Craig, and I was free, and it was a trip to Austin, a city I'd never been to, and I figured, well, what the heck? And then it was like, oh, okay, this is good.
Yeah, and some of our Desert Corral folks were there. Kathleen Rich was there in that performance, I recall.
Yes.
So there's so many connections, of course, between Austin and Santa Fe, between Conspirari. It's wonderful professional choir in the Desert Corral. So it's nice to see that lineage, and to get to talk to somebody who spans all of those ensembles and all of those years.
Well, I was just, what just came to my head? I've lost it. Okay, yeah, but just the span of time too, and the connections that have evolved, and then meeting singers who like maybe heard that Conspirari record, that performance, or even back when I first did it with Mr. Shaw in '89, and one thing leads to another, and then and as I look back across my career, seeing how each engagement has kind of built on what was before, and I've recorded it 4 times now, serious, recording, and each one is different, but how each one kind of came at the right time in a way, building on what I experienced, what a conductor had evolved with it. It's been a great ride, I will say.
Well, it's wonderful to get to know you and to know this history, and to anticipate this recording that will come out from the Desert Corral. And we should say that it is a live recording. And maybe you could tell us, have you ever heard of a live recording of Rachmaninoff Vigil?
I think there might be one out of Russia. judging, because I've got a lot of recordings of it,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and just either that or they didn't do the editing really well. You know, but no, I think this is going to be this will be unique.
It'll be quite
Here's
unique, and of course, it comes with all the things that a live recording comes with, which is, you know, you don't have the ability to go back and redo. So essentially, it's almost like a gymnast, you know, going out and doing a routine and saying you
Yep.
just stick everything perfectly every single time, which is not an easy thing to do.
And also you get what the singers are feeling and the conductor is feeling from the energy in the room,
Mm-hmm.
with having a live audience present, because that inspires, that directs our energy, and it takes the performance to, you know, a special place, and a real place, you know, instead of it being, we'll do another take of that section, you know, no, and piece it all together. That's different. As nice as that is to have something that perfect, you know.
Yeah, there's a human element that you miss in those studio
Right.
recordings. Yeah.
You know, and the challenge of doing a studio recording is to capture you know, make music in a vital and like live feel, but you're kind of fabricating it a little bit, you know, that type of thing. So.
Well, Glenn Miller, it is such a pleasure to get this chance to know you more in detail. You and I have known each other for many years, but I love hearing your story. I love joking with you in rehearsal. I remember well asking you if you needed any help with any of the low bass notes, none of which I could access, but it was so much fun to be with you and to hear you and to be have you as part of those performances back in '16, and just be in conversation here from my lanai with the birds chirping and talking to
Yeah,
Glenn
that's
Miller.
beautiful.
It's a lovely way to have a morning. So thank you for spending this time with us.
Well, thank you for having me be a part of this, you know, this launch of what's going to be. It's a wonderful recording, and not only for the Vespers, but also for Desert Corral, to be out there, in this wonderful array of recordings of this landmark work. You know, it's your contribution. They're all great in their own right. So
Thanks, Glenn. Great to talk to you.
great. You take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.